It was a bright Monday morning, and the halls of the school were alive with chatter and laughter as students filed into their classrooms. Among them was a new face, a quiet and confident young girl with dark braids cascading down her back. Her radiant smile and polished demeanor hinted at her inner strength, but the unease in her eyes suggested she was bracing herself for something. This was her first day at a new school, and while the prospect of meeting new friends excited her, she couldn't shake the anxiety bubbling beneath the surface. The classroom buzzed with energy as the students settled in, eager to start the day. The teacher, a sharp-faced woman with a commanding presence, strode into the room. Her sharp heels clicked against the tiled floor, a sound that seemed to silence the room instantly. She scanned the class, her gaze lingering a moment too long on the new student, her lips curling into a subtle, disapproving smirk. "Everyone, settle down," she barked. "We have a new student joining us today." She turned to the girl, her voice syrupy, but laced with an undercurrent of something bitter. "Stand up and introduce yourself." The girl stood confidently, her voice steady despite the uncomfortable tension hanging in the room. "Hi, everyone. My name is Maya, and I'm really excited to be here." The teacher's eyes narrowed slightly, as if searching for something to criticize. "Well, Maya," she said, her tone overly formal, "let's hope you can keep up with the rest of the class. We run a tight ship here." Maya sat down, feeling the stares of her classmates and the weight of the teacher's gaze. The subtle edge in the teacher's voice didn't go unnoticed by Maya or the other students. It was the kind of tone that didn't need words to convey its meaning. As the lesson began, it became clear that the teacher had a knack for picking favorites, and Maya wasn't one of them. Every time she raised her hand to answer a question, the teacher ignored her. When she spoke, the teacher interrupted or dismissed her ideas with a condescending tone. And yet Maya didn't falter. Her composure remained intact, though her grip on her pencil tightened with each passing minute. Things escalated during group activities. The teacher paired Maya with students who were clearly uninterested in working with her, setting her up for isolation. "Maya, let's see if you can manage this on your own since you seem so eager to prove yourself," the teacher quipped, her words dripping with sarcasm. The classroom felt like a pressure cooker, and Maya was its unwilling centerpiece. Whispers circulated among the students, some sympathetic, others curious. But no one dared to speak up, not even Maya. She knew this was a battle she couldn't win outright, at least, not yet. The tension reached its peak during the lunch break. Maya overheard the teacher speaking with another staff member in the hallway. "I just don't understand why some students are admitted here. Standards are slipping," the teacher said, her voice low but venomous. Maya's stomach tightened. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. What the teacher didn't know was that Maya had a secret. It wasn't just any secret. It was the kind of truth that could turn the entire situation on its head. Because while the teacher saw Maya as just another student to belittle, she had no idea Maya's father was the principal of the school. Maya had intentionally kept this detail to herself, wanting to be treated like any other student. She didn't want special treatment or privileges. But as the day wore on, she realized her silence might be costing her more than she'd anticipated. The final class of the day came, and the teacher seemed determined to make an example out of Maya. "Maya," she said, her voice ringing through the room, "let's see if you can solve this problem on the board. Or is that too much for you to handle?" Maya stood, her legs steady even as the room seemed to shrink around her. She approached the board, her mind racing not just with the math problem, but with the mounting frustration and hurt she'd carried all day. She solved the problem quickly, her chalk strokes firm and deliberate. When she turned around, the teacher's expression was a mixture of surprise and something darker, resentment. "Well," the teacher said, forcing a tight smile, "I suppose even a broken clock is right twice a day." The class fell silent. Maya looked at her teacher, her chest rising and falling as she fought to keep her composure. She wanted to say something, to call out the unfairness, but she held her tongue. Not yet, she thought. As the bell rang, signaling the end of the day, Maya gathered her things and walked out of the classroom. Her resolve was firm, and her mind was made up. The teacher's words might have been sharp, but Maya's spirit was sharper. She knew the truth would come out, and when it did, it would be a lesson the teacher would never forget. Unbeknownst to the teacher, Maya wasn't just a student trying to find her place. She was the daughter of the man who ran the school, a man who valued justice, fairness, and respect above all else. And Maya was about to ensure that those values were upheld, no matter what. Maya walked briskly through the hallways, her thoughts swirling. The teacher's snide remarks replayed in her mind, each one sharper than the last. It wasn't just the words that stung. It was the way they were said, the way her teacher looked at her like she didn't belong. But Maya refused to let the weight of those moments crush her. She knew better than to act impulsively, and she had learned the importance of patience from her father. Her father, Mr. Brooks, had always taught her to remain calm in the face of adversity. "Strength isn't about how loud you can be," he would say, "but about how steady you can stay when things get hard." Maya clung to those words as she stepped outside, the cool afternoon breeze hitting her face. The ride home was quiet. Maya sat in the back seat of her father's car, staring out the window as the world passed by. Mr. Brooks glanced at her in the rearview mirror, his brows furrowing slightly. "How was your first day, sweetheart?" he asked, his voice warm but curious. Maya hesitated for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "It was fine," she said finally, her tone even. She didn't want to worry him. At least not yet. She needed time to process everything, to decide how to handle the situation. Besides, her father was a busy man. She didn't want to add to his plate, unless it was absolutely necessary. Mr. Brooks nodded, though he didn't seem entirely convinced. He knew his daughter well enough to sense when something was off, but he also knew she was fiercely independent and would come to him when she was ready. So, for now, he let it go. At home, Maya retreated to her room, her sanctuary. She sat at her desk, staring at the books neatly lined up on the shelf. Her father had always emphasized the importance of education, of using knowledge as a tool for empowerment. She thought about the teacher, about how someone who was supposed to encourage learning had turned it into a weapon. It wasn't the first time Maya had encountered prejudice. Growing up, she'd learned to navigate the unspoken rules of a world that often judged her before she even had a chance to speak. But this felt different. This wasn't just a passing comment from a stranger on the street. This was someone in a position of authority, someone who had the power to shape the minds of others. And that made it harder to ignore. The next day, Maya walked into school with her head held high. She wasn't going to let one person's negativity define her experience. She had a plan, and she was determined to see it through. Her first step was to observe, to gather information. She needed to understand why the teacher acted the way she did, not just toward her but toward others as well. In class, Maya noticed how the teacher interacted with the students. There was a clear pattern. Certain students received praise and encouragement, while others, like Maya, were met with criticism and indifference. It wasn't just about race, though that seemed to play a significant role. It was about control, about maintaining a sense of superiority. During lunch, Maya sat with a group of students who had been in the teacher's class longer. She listened carefully as they shared their experiences. "She's always been like that," one girl said, rolling her eyes. "If she doesn't like you, she makes it her mission to ruin your day." Another student nodded. "Yeah, and it's not fair. My older brother had her too, and he said the same thing. She picks on people she thinks are easy targets." Maya frowned, her mind racing. This wasn't just about her. It was a pattern, a behavior that had gone unchecked for far too long. And the more she listened, the more determined she became to do something about it. By the time the final bell rang, Maya had a clearer picture of what she was up against. The teacher wasn't just mean. She was calculated, using her position to belittle and demean those she deemed unworthy. But Maya wasn't about to let that continue, not without a fight. That evening, Maya sat across from her father at the dinner table. She could feel his eyes on her as she pushed her food around on her plate. Finally, he spoke. "Maya, is there something you want to tell me?" She looked up, her heart pounding. For a moment, she considered brushing it off, keeping it to herself. But then she thought about the other students, about how many of them might be feeling the same way she did. She couldn't stay silent. "There's something going on at school," she said slowly, her voice steady but quiet. "It's about one of the teachers." Her father leaned forward, his expression serious. "What about the teacher?" Maya took a deep breath and told him everything. She explained how the teacher had treated her, the comments, the dismissiveness, the subtle but undeniable bias. She told him about the other students' stories, about the pattern she had noticed. By the time she finished, her father's face was a mixture of concern and resolve. "Thank you for telling me," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I'll look into this, but I want you to know that you did the right thing by speaking up." Maya nodded, feeling a small weight lift off her shoulders. She knew her father would handle it with the fairness and integrity he was known for. But even as she felt a sense of relief, she couldn't shake the nervous energy bubbling beneath the surface. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The next day at school, Maya noticed a shift. The teacher was quieter, her sharp remarks less frequent. Maya suspected her father had already begun to take action behind the scenes, but the tension in the air was palpable, and Maya couldn't help but wonder how long it would last. By lunchtime, rumors had started to circulate. Whispers of a meeting, of questions being asked, spread through the hallways like wildfire. Maya stayed quiet, keeping her focus on her work. She didn't want to draw attention to herself, not until the truth came to light. But as the days went on, the situation only grew more complicated. The teacher seemed to sense that something was amiss, and her behavior became more erratic. One moment she was overly kind, and the next, she was lashing out. The classroom felt like a minefield, every step uncertain. Maya kept her head down, but inside, she was bracing herself. She knew this was far from over, and the storm was just beginning to brew. As the days went on, the atmosphere in the school became increasingly charged. Maya could feel the eyes on her every time she walked into a room. Some students looked at her with curiosity, others with sympathy. The teacher, still unaware that her actions were being closely scrutinized, continued to act as if nothing had changed. But Maya could sense the growing tension. It was like walking on a tightrope, every day a delicate balance of control and anticipation. She knew something was about to break, but she wasn't sure what. Her father, Mr. Brooks, was a man of few words when it came to his work. He didn't discuss the details of his school duties at home, but Maya had seen the subtle signs, the brief exchanges with other staff members, the way he sometimes stayed up late, making calls or reading reports. She could tell that he was investigating the situation, but she had no idea just how deep the issue had gone. She wasn't even sure what the consequences might be for the teacher, or if there was something else at play that she didn't understand. The teacher's behavior was becoming more erratic. She would often single out students, making them feel uncomfortable with personal comments or scolding them for minor infractions. There were moments when she would be overly kind too, almost as if trying to make up for her earlier treatment. But there was something false about it, like she was trying to win back favor. Maya had never seen this side of her before, and it only added to the unease in the classroom. One afternoon, as the bell rang and students began filing out of the room, the teacher stood at the front, her face tense. Maya was packing her things, trying to keep a low profile. She had learned that drawing attention to herself only made things worse. But just as she stood to leave, the teacher called her name. "Maya, can I speak with you for a moment?" she asked, her voice colder than usual. Maya hesitated. The last thing she wanted was another confrontation. But she didn't want to appear afraid, either. She nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. The classroom emptied, and the door clicked shut behind the last student. The teacher approached Maya, standing just a few feet away. There was a coldness in her eyes that hadn't been there before, something sharper. "I've noticed you've been distant lately," the teacher said. Her voice clipped. "Is there something you want to share with me?" Maya's mind raced. She could feel the weight of the question, the pressure to give the right answer. But she wasn't about to back down. "No," she said firmly, meeting the teacher's gaze. "I'm just focused on my studies." The teacher's lips pressed together, and for a moment, there was silence between them. Maya could feel the tension hanging in the air, thick and heavy. She knew this wasn't just about her behavior in class. It was about something deeper, something that the teacher was unwilling to acknowledge. "Well," the teacher said, her voice softer but laced with an unsettling edge, "I hope you can continue to keep up. We don't tolerate students who aren't committed here." Maya nodded, her breath shallow, but she didn't say anything. She knew it wasn't worth engaging any further. She turned and walked toward the door, her heart racing. As she stepped into the hallway, she glanced back once, catching the teacher's eyes following her, a look of something close to disdain in them. The encounter left Maya unsettled, but she knew she had to keep her composure. She had a feeling the teacher was starting to sense that something was coming. Maybe not from Maya, but from somewhere. Maya couldn't shake the sense that the situation was escalating, that the tension was building towards something neither she nor the teacher could control. That evening, as the dinner table grew quiet, Maya's father looked at her carefully. He'd been distant lately, lost in his thoughts. She had seen him interact with a few of the teachers, but his demeanor was always calm, composed. It was rare for him to show concern, but tonight there was something different about him. "Maya," he began, his voice serious, "there's been some concern raised regarding the teacher you've had issues with." His eyes were intense, studying her closely. "I need you to tell me everything you know about her." Maya swallowed hard. She hadn't expected him to bring it up so directly. She hadn't wanted to involve him too much, but now it was clear that things were getting out of hand. "She's been treating me unfairly," Maya said quietly, choosing her words carefully. "Not just me, others too. But I don't think it's just about me. It feels personal." Her father nodded slowly, taking in her words. "I've been hearing things. There are complaints. I need to know if there's something more, something we're missing." Maya hesitated, unsure of how much to say. She didn't want to make it worse, didn't want to seem like she was overreacting. But the pressure inside her was building, and she knew her father had the right to know what was going on. "She's been making comments, and not just to me," Maya explained. "She picks on certain students, singles them out, makes them feel like they don't belong. It's not just in the classroom. It's like she's trying to break us down. I've seen it happen to others." Mr. Brooks took a deep breath, his jaw tight. "I've had my concerns about her for a while," he said, his voice low. "There's been a lot of talk, but nothing concrete. I can't take action based on rumors, Maya. I need to know the truth. Are you sure she's treating others the way you say she is?" Maya nodded, her eyes steady. "I've seen it happen, more than once." Her father looked at her for a long moment, then exhaled slowly. "All right. I'll handle this. You've done the right thing, Maya." But as she left the dinner table that night, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to explode. Her father might have the power to make things right, but it wasn't going to be easy. The teacher wouldn't back down without a fight, and Maya didn't know just how far she was willing to go to protect her position. As the days went on, she could feel the clock ticking, each moment leading closer to the inevitable confrontation. And when it came, she had no idea what to expect. All she knew was that it would change everything. The next few days felt like a slow-motion train wreck. Maya could feel the pressure building, the tension stretching thinner and thinner. Her father had assured her that he was handling things, that everything would be addressed. But Maya couldn't shake the unease in her chest. She watched the teacher's behavior with growing suspicion. The air in the classroom had changed, but so had the teacher. She wasn't acting like a woman with nothing to hide. She was acting like a woman with a secret. It was during one of the following mornings that things took an unexpected turn. Maya arrived at school early, trying to focus on her studies before the first bell rang. She was sitting at her desk when the door to the classroom opened with a loud creak. The teacher walked in, but this time there was something different about her. She wasn't the same sharp, confident figure Maya had encountered before. Today, she looked agitated, her eyes darting around the room as if she were on edge. For a brief moment, Maya locked eyes with her, but the teacher quickly turned away, muttering something under her breath. Maya couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. Frantic, almost desperate. Maya's instincts told her that something wasn't right. The teacher was hiding something, but what? As the class filled, Maya's unease deepened. The teacher was acting strangely. She was quick to snap at anyone who dared speak out of turn, her irritation palpable. But there was something more, something behind her eyes, a flicker of fear that Maya had never seen before. Then it happened. The teacher called Maya to the front of the class again, just as she had done a few days earlier. Maya stood, unsure of what to expect, but the teacher's demeanor was different this time. There was a nervousness to her, a shift that made Maya's heart race. "I want to speak with you," the teacher said in a low voice, glancing around the classroom as if worried someone might overhear. Now, Maya's pulse quickened as she walked to the front of the room. She could feel the eyes of her classmates on her, their curiosity barely masked by the low hum of conversation. The teacher motioned for her to step outside. Without a word, Maya followed, her mind racing with questions. The hallway was empty, silent except for the distant sound of students shuffling through the halls. The teacher's hand was shaking as she motioned for Maya to stand by the lockers. She leaned in, speaking in a hushed tone. "You need to stop," she said, her voice almost pleading. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but you need to stop. This is bigger than you think." Maya froze, her breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady, even though every nerve in her body was on high alert. The teacher's eyes darted nervously, scanning the empty hallway again. "Your father," she began, her voice trembling. "He's been asking questions, but you don't understand. There are people involved who don't want this getting out. It's not just me. If you push this any further, it will affect everything. Your father, he's in danger." Maya's heart dropped. She didn't know what she had expected, but this wasn't it. Danger. Her father. She could feel the ground shifting beneath her feet. "What are you talking about?" she demanded, her voice rising, though she tried to keep it in check. The teacher closed her eyes, as if steeling herself against something. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she whispered. "I never wanted to hurt anyone. But now I'm in too deep." Maya stepped back, her mind racing. "What are you involved in? What do you know about my father?" She could barely control her breath, her pulse a steady drumbeat in her ears. The room felt suffocating, the weight of the teacher's words pressing down on her. For a moment, the teacher said nothing, her face twisted in conflicted emotions. Then, finally, she spoke, her words so quiet that Maya had to lean in to hear them. "I didn't know who you were at first," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "But when I found out, I couldn't stop. Your father, he's been digging into something that he shouldn't. People are watching him, Maya. They've been watching him for a while. It's bigger than you can imagine." Maya's head spun as she tried to process the revelation. What could possibly be so dangerous that her father, a respected principal, was now a target? What was the teacher involved in? The teacher's face twisted into a grimace as she stepped back, her hands trembling. "You have to be careful. If they find out what I've told you, it's not just your father who'll be in danger. It's you too." The warning struck Maya like a bolt of lightning. And in that moment, everything felt like it was slipping out of control. This wasn't just a matter of a prejudiced teacher, it was something far darker. Something that connected her father to forces she couldn't even comprehend. And now, Maya was caught in the middle of it. Before Maya could respond, the teacher turned abruptly, glancing down the hallway again as if she were afraid someone might be coming. "I have to go," she said quickly, walking away without another word. Maya stood frozen in place, the shock of the conversation paralyzing her. Her mind raced, each thought tumbling over the other. Her father had been investigating something dangerous, something that had drawn unwanted attention. Maya didn't know what it was, but she could feel the weight of the unknown pressing in on her, suffocating her. And as she stood there, trying to piece everything together, a new realization dawned on her. The danger wasn't just around her father anymore. It was now surrounding her too. The stakes had just been raised, and there was no turning back. Maya stood in the hallway, her mind reeling from what the teacher had just revealed. Her father's name was tied to something dangerous, something her father had been investigating without her knowing. She wanted to run to him, tell him everything. But she knew she had to be cautious. Whoever these people were, they were clearly watching, and making the wrong move could put them all in grave danger. She needed answers, and she needed them fast. By the time the final bell rang, Maya had made up her mind. She wasn't going to sit around and wait for something bad to happen. She had to talk to her father directly, get to the heart of the matter before everything spiraled out of control. She headed straight for his office after school, her heart pounding with every step. When she arrived, she found the door slightly ajar. Without knocking, she pushed it open, her breath catching in her throat as she saw her father at his desk. But it wasn't just him. Sitting across from him was someone Maya had never seen before, an older man with cold, calculating eyes, a presence that sent a chill down her spine. Her father looked tense, his usually calm demeanor visibly shaken. "Dad," Maya called out, her voice shaky. Mr. Brooks turned in his chair, his expression immediately softening when he saw her. But there was an unmistakable shadow in his eyes, a tension that told her something was wrong. "Maya," he said, his voice firm but with an underlying caution, "you shouldn't be here." The stranger across from him leaned back in his chair, studying Maya with a look that made her feel like she was being assessed. "It's not safe, Mr. Brooks," the man said in a low, gravelly voice. "Not for her, not for either of you." Maya's heart raced as the gravity of the situation finally sank in. This was bigger than just the teacher. It was bigger than anything she had ever imagined. "Who are you?" Maya demanded, her voice rising with a mixture of fear and anger. She needed answers, and she needed them now. The man didn't respond immediately, but the tension in the room grew thicker. Mr. Brooks sighed, his gaze shifting from Maya to the man in front of him. "Maya, this isn't something you should be involved in. It's dangerous." "I don't care." Maya shot back, her emotions overwhelming her. "I need to know what's going on. Why was the teacher acting like that? Why are you in danger?" Her father stood, walking over to her slowly, his hand held out in a calming gesture. "It's not something I wanted to bring you into, but you need to understand. This is about more than just the school. It's about corruption, Maya. There are people in powerful positions who don't want the truth to come out." Maya's mind spun. What truth? The man leaned forward then, his voice steady but forceful. "Your father's been digging into a series of fraudulent practices that have been going on in the district. Corruption that's been hidden for years. People have been manipulating funds, embezzling money meant for the students and the school's resources. It's a network of people who are willing to do anything to keep their secret hidden." Maya's legs felt weak beneath her as the weight of the revelation hit her like a ton of bricks. Her father wasn't just dealing with a biased teacher. He was up against a powerful network of corrupt individuals who had used their influence to manipulate the entire district. She looked at her father, the shock evident in her expression. "But the teacher," Maya whispered, her voice trembling. "She's a part of it, isn't she?" Mr. Brooks nodded slowly, his face drawn. "She wasn't always like this. She got involved with the wrong people, and they've been using her to keep their secrets. She wasn't supposed to let you know, Maya. She was trying to intimidate you into staying quiet." Maya's mind raced as everything started to click into place. The teacher's behavior, her strange warnings, her sudden panic. It all made sense now. She had been caught in the middle of something much larger than herself. And now her father was too. The stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. Suddenly, the door to the office slammed open, and a group of men in suits stormed in. Maya's breath caught in her throat as she recognized the leader of the group, one of the school's board members, a man who had always appeared friendly and well-meaning, someone her father had trusted. His eyes were cold now, calculating, as he scanned the room with a sneer. "Maya, Mr. Brooks," the man said, his voice smooth but threatening. "We've been expecting this little conversation." Maya stepped back instinctively, her heart hammering in her chest. The situation had escalated beyond anything she could have imagined. Her father, standing beside her, was suddenly on edge. "What do you want?" he demanded, his voice firm despite the danger surrounding them. The man in the suit smiled darkly. "We just want to make sure that all loose ends are tied up, Mr. Brooks. You've been too curious, too persistent. We don't like people poking around in things they don't understand. You've made a lot of enemies." Maya felt a wave of nausea wash over her as she realized the extent of the danger they were in. Her father wasn't just fighting for justice. He was fighting for their lives. These men weren't just corrupt officials. They were powerful enough to make anyone disappear. "Dad, we need to go now," Maya whispered urgently, grabbing his arm. But before her father could respond, the man in the suit turned and nodded to his associates. In a flash, one of them pulled out a gun, pointing it directly at Maya's father. The room went cold. Maya's blood ran cold, and her heart dropped into her stomach. "You're not going anywhere," the man in the suit said, his tone chilling. Maya felt the world tilt beneath her feet. The moment she had dreaded was finally here, the moment when everything could fall apart. But just as she thought the worst was about to happen, something unexpected occurred. The door flew open again. This time, it was the teacher, Maya's former teacher. She was panting, her face pale and eyes wide with fear. "Stop," she shouted, her voice shaking. "You can't do this." "They can't." She stopped abruptly as the men in suits turned their cold eyes toward her. Maya's father took a step forward, his expression resolute. "You don't have to do this," he said to the teacher. "Help us. Help me protect Maya." The teacher looked torn, her gaze flickering between the men with the guns and Maya's father. For a moment, it seemed like she was going to back down. But then, with a sudden, defiant movement, she stepped in front of the gunman, her body trembling but her resolve clear. "I'm not letting you hurt them," she said, her voice cracking. "I was wrong. All of this, it's not worth it." The men in suits froze, their eyes narrowing. For a brief moment, it felt like the entire world hung in the balance, the tension suffocating. Then, in an unexpected twist, the teacher pulled something from her coat pocket, a small recording device, and tossed it toward the group of men. The device clattered to the floor, and suddenly, the room was filled with the unmistakable sound of a recording. The voice of the board member, speaking plainly about the fraudulent activities, the bribes, the cover-ups. It was all there, caught on tape. The truth had finally come out. The men in suits exchanged looks of panic as they scrambled to silence the device. But it was too late. The damage was done. Maya's father stepped forward, his voice calm but full of authority. "It's over," he said, his words cutting through the tension like a knife. "You're done." The men hesitated for a long moment before they turned and fled the room, knowing they had been exposed. Maya looked at her father, her breath coming in ragged gasps, and then at the teacher, whose face was a mixture of relief and regret. The battle wasn't over, but the truth had been revealed, and in the end, it was truth that would set them free. But as they walked out of the office, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story. Something still lurking beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. The dust had barely settled from the chaotic confrontation in the office. Maya stood at the door, her hand still gripping the handle, the weight of everything that had just happened hanging in the air like a thick fog. Her heart was still racing, her mind replaying every moment. The face of the teacher, her father's steady resolve, the terrifying moment when the gun was pointed at him. It was all too much to process at once. Her father turned to her, his expression a mix of exhaustion and relief. "Maya, we're safe now. They can't hurt us anymore." Maya nodded slowly, still in shock. The world she knew had just been shattered, replaced by a dangerous web of secrets and corruption. She had never imagined her father, the calm, level-headed principal, would be wrapped up in something so dark. The truth had come out, yes, but it had left behind so many questions. And despite everything that had happened, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that there was still something unfinished, something that hadn't been resolved. They left the school that evening, the silence between them a heavy one. The air felt different now, charged with the weight of the truth, the aftermath of the confrontation still hanging over them. Maya's father drove slowly, his eyes focused on the road, but his mind seemed far away. Maya could tell he was replaying the events in his head, just as she was. They both needed time to process, but she also knew they needed to talk. "Dad, what happens now?" Maya asked softly, breaking the silence. "Will the police? Will they do anything?" Her father sighed, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. "We've given them the evidence. The recordings, the documents. The truth is out there now. But it's going to take time for everything to fall into place. The people behind this will fight back. They'll try to cover their tracks, discredit us, but we've done what we can." Maya nodded, the uncertainty in her stomach growing. "Do you think the teacher will be okay?" Her father hesitated, glancing at her before focusing back on the road. "I'm not sure. She took a huge risk, helping us. But she didn't have much of a choice. She was being manipulated, just like everyone else. Hopefully, she'll find a way to get out of this mess. But it's going to be hard for her. This kind of thing doesn't just go away." Maya thought about the teacher, the woman who had first seemed like nothing more than a biased, angry figure in her life. The woman who had made her feel small, unworthy of respect. But beneath that cold, condescending exterior, Maya realized there had been fear, a deep-rooted fear of the consequences she might face. The teacher wasn't a villain, but a victim in her own way. "Do you think the school will be okay?" Maya asked, the weight of the question sinking in. "The students, the other teachers." Her father took a deep breath, his eyes flickering to her for a moment. "It will be tough. There will be a lot of fallout. But the truth is, this kind of corruption runs deep in places like this. If we don't do something about it, it will only get worse. We need to rebuild. Trust is broken, but we can fix it. It's going to take time." They were almost home when her father's phone rang. Maya watched him glance at the screen before answering it. He spoke in low, measured tones, his voice calm but serious. Maya didn't eavesdrop, but she could tell by the way he was nodding, his expression hardening, that something else was coming. When he hung up, his face was grimmer than before. "That was the police. They've already made some arrests. Several members of the board, including the man who was with us earlier today. They're still working on getting to the others." "But Maya..." She turned to him, sensing the gravity in his voice. "What?" Her father's eyes met hers, filled with a mixture of concern and determination. "This isn't over. There are still people involved in this who have influence, people who will stop at nothing to protect themselves. We need to stay vigilant. There's a lot more to this than we realized." Maya felt a shiver run down her spine. Her father was right. While the immediate danger had passed, the fight was far from over. It wasn't just about exposing the truth now. It was about dismantling a system that had been built on lies and deceit, and that was something no one could do alone. The next few weeks passed in a blur. News about the corruption in the school district spread like wildfire, reaching the media, local authorities, and even national outlets. The arrests were just the beginning, and soon There were more revelations, more people implicated. Maya's father worked tirelessly with the authorities, trying to piece together the full scope of what had happened. He was driven by a need for justice, but Maya could see the toll it was taking on him. The late nights, the endless meetings, the constant threat of retaliation, it weighed on him. But through it all, Maya stayed by his side, supporting him however she could. She spent hours reading the documents and listening to the recordings. She stayed up late, helping him organize the evidence, making sure everything was in order for the upcoming trials. It was clear now that the fight wasn't just about her father's career. It was about making sure this kind of corruption could never happen again. Maya also spent time reflecting on what had happened. She thought about the teacher, about how she had tried to bully her at first, how she had tried to tear her down. But in the end, the woman had been just another victim of the system, someone who had been forced into compliance through fear. Maya couldn't help but feel sympathy for her, despite everything. It was a complicated feeling, but Maya knew it was important not to forget that the people caught in these systems weren't always the bad guys. Sometimes, they were just trying to survive. The weeks turned into months, and gradually, the pieces began to fall into place. The corrupt officials were tried and convicted, their crimes exposed for the world to see. The school district was overhauled, and new leadership was put in place. People who had the students' best interests at heart. The fight was long, but in the end, the truth had prevailed. Maya's relationship with her father had changed, too. They were closer now, stronger than ever. She had seen him in a new light, not just as her father, but as a man who had stood up for what was right, no matter the cost. His resilience had inspired her, and she had grown in ways she never expected. And though the scars of the past would always remain, Maya knew that they had emerged from the darkness stronger than before. They had fought for what was right, and in the end, they had won. As the final trial concluded, and the corrupt figures were brought to justice, Maya found herself sitting at her father's desk in his office, now a place of peace instead of tension. Her father had been through so much, but now there was a sense of closure, of justice served. The air in the office was calm. The weight of the past lifted. "I'm proud of you, Maya," her father said quietly, his voice filled with emotion. "You showed a strength I never expected. You helped me fight this battle every step of the way. I don't know how we would have gotten through it without you." Maya smiled softly, her heart swelling with pride. "I couldn't have done it without you, Dad. You taught me how to stand up for what's right." As she sat there, taking in the quiet peace that now filled the room, Maya realized something important. The world wasn't perfect. It was full of people who tried to hide the truth, people who used power for their own gain. But there was always a way to fight back. There was always a way to make things right. And as long as there were people who were willing to stand up for the truth, there was always hope. The battle was over, but the lessons Maya had learned would stay with her forever.